The story of Joshua Elishev could be your story. It could be your son's story. A story of a smart kid, perhaps too smart for his own good. After a near perfect SAT score, Joshua was educated in prison, not the Naval Academy. The author of the gripping new book, Privilege Lost, gives an oral account of his life before, during, and after his 5 years in prison in this 12-part podcast series, Losing Privilege. Losing Privilege, where we last left off, the door closed behind you and you were standing on free soil. But before we get that, I want to go back a little bit more in depth than we did in the last episode. You had talked about you didn't really trust to tell people that your sentence and your release date was coming up. 30 days before your release, what was your mindset?
So 30 days before my release, I shifted from counting weeks to counting days. Early on, we counted years. The last 2 years, I counted months. At 30 days, I had been counting weeks for about 6 months. That was the biggest shift, because now it was not. I looked at my calendar every weekend. I looked at my calendar every day. It sounds a little bit neurotic or compulsive. It absolutely was. I couldn't not look at it. It was so close. I could taste real pizza. I could smell real shampoo and soap. I could smell my dad's hair. Like, that's how close I was at 30 days. I stopped being able to sleep all the way through the night. Sleep is a really loose term, but I would sleep very lightly through most of the night during most of my sentence. Lightly enough that if a cockroach sneezed, I would sit bolt upright ready to fight, but I would still be sleeping. When I hit the 30-day mark, that stopped. I would wake up a dozen times throughout the night, not be able to fall back asleep. I was getting really anxious, right? Part of it was excitement. Like, oh my God, this is finally going to be over. The torture, the boredom, it's coming to an end. But it was also overwhelming how terrifying it was. Because for 5 years, I've known exactly what each day entails, right? Breakfast, same time every day, Monday through Friday, Saturday and Sunday. Lunch, same time every day. Dinner, same time every day. Chapel service, same schedule, week after week after week.
But that type of schedule is one of the things that you really liked about the Marines. The regiment of that. We've talked about dichotomies in past episodes. Is that a dichotomy for you, where you found solace in the Marines and then you probably found a complete lack of freedom for the exact same structure in prison?
Yeah, it absolutely is. And when the routine, part of what keeps the time moving so it doesn't feel like you're standing still, where a day doesn't go on for an eternity, is routine. And the weekends were always, the 2 days of the weekend actually felt longer than the entire 5-day week, Monday through Friday, because Monday through Friday, there was always things happening. While everything was structured, it was structured, but there was things going on. On the weekend, the structures oftentimes fell apart. on the weekend. Sometimes they adhered to it, sometimes they didn't, but there wasn't much going on. So the uncertainty in an environment where your survival is already uncertain, that's the structure makes that survivable. So looking at release 30 days away, it was terrifying because in 30 days, where am I going to sleep? What am I going to eat? What am I going to wear? I haven't had to pick clothes in 5 years. I had two shirts.
No closets.
No, I mean, I had 2 shirts, 2 shorts, 2 pairs of boxers, 2 pairs of pants. Everything was blue. They were all exactly the same. I mean, what am I going to wear? I don't even have any clothes. It's been 5 years. The clothes I arrived in, they don't fit. I've lost so much weight, but also they got thrown away 5 years ago. And my mom and my dad, all of my clothes got thrown away. I mean, they stored them for a little while, but when 15 months turned into 5 years, they weren't paying for 5 years of storage for some clothing. So I had nothing. I didn't have boxers. I didn't have socks. I didn't have pants. I didn't have shorts. I didn't have shoes. How am I going to go to a job interview? I don't have a button-up shirt and tie.
At 30 days.
That's what was going through my head at 30 days is I'm so excited to leave, but I'm terrified of leaving.
At 30 days, and as that started to count down, every day, 30 to 29 to 28 to 27, did you feel like every day that you got closer to your release date, it actually felt like you were farther away?
Yes. And I frequently use the analogy of the horror movie when there's a doorway at the end of the hallway and you have to get to that doorway. And the faster you run towards that doorway, the faster that hallway stretches out and the doorway gets further away faster than you can get towards it. And that was the feeling from 30 days. From 30 to 31 went by way faster than from 30 to 29. And 30 to 29 went way faster than 15 to 14. And my last 2 days, they were at least a year long each, my last 2 days before I went home. So each day that we got closer, that day got longer and more painful. And everything about prison that I hated or that made me uncomfortable stood out more sharply. Things that I had learned to tune out or to ignore, or that had just become so commonplace that I didn't even notice them, they were there in my face. I couldn't get away from it. So the anxiety, the sense of being on edge and jittery, I didn't tell almost anybody that I was getting close to getting home. The guys that had been locked up a long time, they didn't need to be told, because the physical characteristics on how that stress and anxiety manifest, I'm not special. They had seen it hundreds and hundreds of times every single time somebody else was getting close to going home. You want to fight about everything because you're terrified that anything is going to jeopardize it, but you're equally as terrified of going home. So part of you wants to self-sabotage because you're scared of leaving.
It sounds like you were crawling out of your skin.
I was. And I don't do drugs. And I had never done drugs, but I had been around enough people who were addicts and did different drugs that I feel like those last 30 days, I might as well have been a crackhead or a meth head or a heroin addict, because I was like twitchy and my skin was
like you were in detox.
It was worse than that, because when I came off the morphine, I was in detox at the beginning of my sentence. And this was totally different, because this wasn't just physical. this wasn't just physical and some shakes and not being able to sleep. This was psychological. It was rough, man. I was like twitchy and spazzy, and I couldn't sit still. I mean, I had spent 5 years sitting still. I could meditate for an hour. I would do it 2 or 3 times a day just to pass the time, take my head somewhere else. I couldn't sit still for 5 minutes. I had lost my appetite. I couldn't eat. The food that was so disgusting that I couldn't eat it when I first arrived, and that then I learned to find it delicious by about halfway through. All of a sudden, it was disgusting again because I could taste the real pizza. It was so close. I could taste the hamburger. I could taste what I wanted more than anything else was a salad, something fresh, something nutritious. And the food, everything was just, the food was wilted. The colors of everything were wrong. The air just felt weird. My clothes, nothing fit right. It was the same clothes I'd been wearing for 5 years, but all of a sudden everything irritated me. My roommate snoring in his sleep. I had gotten to a point where I tuned it out. It was like white noise that just, I couldn't sleep if I didn't have a roommate snoring. And then all of a sudden it was just like he started snoring and it was like a gunshot going off. I sat bolt upright. I wanted to throttle him for it. Everything, every little thing. And the two lifers that I've talked about, they would see it. They could see it written all over me. And, hey, Josh, hey, come over here. Come sit and talk with me. And they would just talk with me. We'd talk about the Bible, about religion, Dungeons and Dragons, about the Marine Corps, about women, whatever. We could talk about pizza. They would just sit and talk with me. And the moment the conversation kind of fizzled out, they would be okay until they could see if I started getting uncomfortable. They would strike it right back up. These guys they saw what I was going through. They'd seen it 1,000 times. For some reason, they wanted to make it easier on me.
We've talked in the past about how a layperson, someone who has never been in prison, you would think that situation would be completely the opposite. And I know you must have taken great solace in the fact that, people recognized what you were going through and wanted to help you through it. That last night, you said you couldn't sleep, slipping off of your bunk because it was over 100 degrees and it's a plastic bunk. And first thought that I had when you said that in the previous episode is, I hope you were on the bottom bunk.
I was.
So that's a good thing. Take me through being processed out.
So every person who gets processed out, it's a little bit different, even though it's always the same. Sometimes people get called and processed out at 7 o'clock in the morning. Sometimes it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon. The longer that drags on, they know that it gets in your head. And it's one last final way for the guards to just say, fuck you. If you have family waiting for you, they process you a little bit faster because they can't justify doing that to family sitting in the parking lot. My family arrived fairly early. So that morning, I went to the chow hall in the morning to get out of the dorm and to give my food away to somebody. I couldn't eat. I didn't want to eat. I was going home. I was going to go get breakfast. The first thing I was going to do was go get food to eat. We're literally up the road, pick a restaurant and get food to eat. So I went and I gave my food away to somebody who didn't have canteen. He didn't have anything, he appreciated having an extra meal. And then I went back into my room and I had a couple of things that I had not given away the night before. I wanted to wait till the very last minute, just in case for any reason something happened that delayed. So the last of my clothing, my pillow, my mattress. I had been locked up long enough. I had worked in laundry that I had one of the best mattresses on the whole compound. And so I made, there was people wanted my mattress and my pillow. They'd been coming to me for months trying to buy it from me. And so I made sure that I gave that to one of the guys that had a life sentence that was going to be there for a long time. One little thing to make an eternity a little bit less uncomfortable. And then, man, then I just tried not to go out of my mind waiting, because I was confined to, it really was a dungeon, man. It was dark. Everything was dark. It was humid. It was early enough in the morning. They kept most of the lights off. It was a dungeon, and just sitting in the dungeon, just waiting. Are they going to call me now? Are they going to call me in an hour? Like, why haven't they called me yet? That was what was going through it. And Shane had no reason to stay awake. He was able to go back to sleep for another couple of hours, but he didn't. Shane kicked his roommate out of the room, and I stayed in the room with Shane, and we just talked. And every time my brain spiraled, like, hey man, why haven't they called me yet? Shane was like, Josh, chill. I don't have a release date. My release date says 99999999. Like, I don't have a release date. You've got one. It's today. Just, they'll call you when they call you. He said that exact same thing to me at least 10 times that morning over the course of 2 or 3 hours, because my head just like, I just kept, why haven't they called me? It's 7:05. Well, it's 7:30. It's 8 o'clock. Why haven't they called me? I know my family's been there since 7. Man, I was freaking out. I was really freaking out. Like, did they mess it up? They find a way to make me stay. Like, they could make me stay for 3 more months. What's going on? And then finally they called my name. Man, I would tell you that I skipped, but I don't think skipping is the right way to describe how fast I moved from Shane's room to the door out of the dormitory as soon as they came over the loudspeaker and said, told Josh, roll it up. So I was gone. Everything was already rolled up. I had to turn in a mattress. So I had given him the nice one. Like 35 people had all swapped mattresses. And then I took the shittiest mattress out of the dorm to turn back in. And you have to turn a set of sheets in. So I got the shittiest set of sheets from somebody. That way somebody was able to have my, nicer sheets. And it was ready to go, man. It was bundled up like a sleeping bag. The moment they called me, I was standing there at the door. They're like, I gave you like a 15-minute heads up. They're not ready for you. What do you mean they're not ready for me? You just told me to roll it up. Here I am. I'm ready. Let me go. Oh, we can't. Sorry, Josh. We can't take you up there without an escort. I gotta wait until they send somebody. That's okay. I'm going home. Just open the door. I'll walk myself up there right now. You don't worry. Like, I'm going home. I'm not running away. No, I'm sorry. Rules are rules. We can't do that. You got to wait for an escort. Come on, let me go. So I finally got the escort. I got up there to the main administration building, and I didn't realize that the waiting was only just starting. After all of that, the waiting was only just starting. They have clothing that gets donated from local churches, and they gave me a pair of used khaki pants, this giant Hawaiian floral print shirt. Like, nothing fit. Everything was wrong, but it was clothing. So I changed. I had to stand literally like in the middle of a driveway, right out in the open, strip naked, change my clothes. And what's crazy is all of the visitors that were waiting to come in to visit their families and stuff, everybody was out in the parking lot. Some of them were in the visiting park. I had to strip naked in front of everybody's visitors and their family to swap out my clothes. And then I had to sit there inside a little chain link dog cage for like an hour. And then they finally called me, and I got I had to get fingerprinted, and there's a whole lot more. You don't just like get called, you walk out the door, you hear the gates close behind you. There's a lot of paperwork. You have to sign a bunch of stuff. You have to, release them from certain liabilities. Then you got to do each one of your fingerprints individually, your whole hands, the edge of your fingers. That way, if there's any crimes committed, they got lots and lots of fingerprints on file. And then finally, this whole time, I can see the parking lot. I could see my dad. I could see my dad sitting in a folding chair, and I could see my mom and my stepdad sitting like 20 feet away in a folding chair. And because my mom and my dad hate each other, so they couldn't just greet me at the same time. They had to be separate. But I could see them this whole time, and I think they could see me too, because at one point, like, they stood up and looking right at me. There was still another like 30, 40 minutes before I managed to make it the 10 feet through the door to them. And then I finally got to walk outside. And, I don't remember. I don't remember whether I hugged my mom or my dad first. But I hugged my mom and I hugged my dad. And my dad tried to let go like 4 times, and I didn't let him go. And then they had driven their own separate vehicles, and I'm sure my decision to ride with my dad really hurt my mom. My mom had driven all the way down from North Carolina to be there when I was released. Dad drove all the way up from South Florida. I was in Central Florida. So, I was really selfish. I should have gone with my mom, but I'm a daddy's boy. And so I went with my dad, and we went to Cracker Barrel, and I made myself sick because I hadn't eaten food that rich and heavy in 5 years.
Sure.
And I made myself sick. But I sat there with my dad and my mom and my stepdad and my stepmom, and it was unreal. I couldn't stop talking. I had so many things to tell them, and I was so happy. And looking back, they were clearly really uncomfortable hearing about me telling them about what my life had been like, and I just couldn't see it because it was completely normal. It was what my life had been like, and for them, like the things that we've talked about over the last 9 episodes or so. Some of this stuff is heavy. Some of this stuff is uncomfortable. I tried to tell all of this to my family over breakfast that morning. And, I had, my hair was like stiff because the soap that they give us is wax based. So I looked like Joe Dirt when I came out. I was a sight to behold. And then I was a dick again because my mom drove all the way to South Florida from Central Florida after having driven down from North Carolina. And I chose to ride with my dad again, even though I was going to be staying within a few minutes of my dad. And so I look back and I feel pretty terrible about that because that was kind of a slap in the face to my mom. But at that moment, it was my dad. I wanted my dad. So we drove all the way down, and I couldn't stop talking the whole way. My stepmom, at some point in her past, she had worked as a nurse in a prison in Florida, and she had to quit. The atrocities that she witnessed when she was a nurse, she knew enough about what it was like. She didn't want to hear it. She didn't want to hear me talking about it. She couldn't, when my dad would come to visit me, she wouldn't visit. She would stay out in the car all day in the parking lot, but she couldn't do it. So the ride home, I talked the whole way. It was like 5-6 hour drive. I talked the whole way. And then we got down here, and my dad and my mom and everybody, they all knew the very first thing I wanted to do was to eat real food, which we did. The very second thing I wanted to do was take a real shower. I wanted to get clean for the first time in 5 years and put on clean clothes for the first time in 5 years. And that's what I did. My mom had picked up the soap that I had used for the last 20 years of my life, and she had gotten me, I didn't have a lot of clothes, but she had gotten me a set of clothes. She got the right size. She got me nice, comfortable, new clothes. They were clean, and she got me a loofah. Like, my mom really went over the top. And I had no idea where we were going. I had no idea where I was going to stay. I had kind of expected I would stay with my dad and my stepmom. They have 3 guest bedrooms, and both of her kids are off on their own around the country. My sisters lived out of state. That's where I thought I was going. That's not where I went. My stepmom wouldn't allow me to stay under her roof. But my dad and my mom had chipped in together, and they paid for 30 days. They paid for 30 days in a fully furnished 1-bedroom apartment that was maybe 100 feet from my dad's house, because they knew it was going to be a huge adjustment, and my dad wanted to be right there to make sure that I had anything I needed in order to get my life back on track. They even took me grocery shopping, which was really hard because the sensory overload, I couldn't be in the grocery store for more than 5 minutes at a time. Send me in to get a gallon of milk, I wouldn't make it all the way to the milk shelf. I'd be overwhelmed. I had to leave. So they bought me enough groceries for a month, set me up in this really nice apartment. My dad even brought over a computer. He had an extra computer. He set me up with a computer, got on the Wi-Fi, and they made it clear.
You had 30 days.
30 days.
To buy a car and get a place to live.
Buy a car, get a place of my own, have a job. I had 30 days to figure it out, which most people who come out of prison, they either go stay with their family or they're homeless. Nobody has their family give them a fully furnished place for 30 days. So I came out and I had a huge leg up over the normal person who's coming out. You know, think about it.
But
in fairness, 30 days is not a lot.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I mean, 30 days. Look, 30 days in one place like your parents set you up with is certainly a leg up. But 30 days to accomplish job, home, car from ground zero, from scratch, I think that would be a tall tale for just about anybody that doesn't have to check felon on an application. I mean, I don't think 30 days to get a car, a job, and a place to live for a recent college graduate is a likely scenario. So faced with all of this, what do you do for the next 30 days? We've talked about walking around the neighborhood at 3 o'clock in the morning and trying to buy one thing at Publix and then 2 things at Publix and get past the sensory overload. But how do you go from zero to building a life for yourself in 30 days?
So my mom, that first night home, we sat down. We all had pizza because I wanted pizza. And I had a beer with my dad for the first time in my life. And my mom pulls out an envelope, one of those skinny, like, bank deposit envelopes. And she hands it to me. And I open it up, and there's like $3,500 in it. And she said, I made a promise to all of you kids, 30 years ago, when you were young, when you were all just born. Whatever I do for one of you, I'm going to do for all of you. And if I can't do it for all of you, I'll do it for none of you. I'm not paying for one person's college and not everybody's. If I can't pay for all of it, you're all on your own. Well, over the last 5 years, this is the amount of money that your sisters have gotten from me for laundry, for gas, for whatever. This is 5 years of what they've got. So each one of them got about $3,500 from my mom, spread out over 5 years of, Mom, let me borrow $20. Mom, I need a tank of gas, whatever. And so she handed me $3,500 or 38. It was a little bit over $3,500. It's not enough to get an apartment, right? Apartment, they want first, last, and security. The money wasn't going to buy me a job. What it did do is it eliminated one of the three major issues. I was able to buy a car. I went to a trusted mechanic friend of the family, and he had a beat up old, 2000 Toyota Camry that he had maintained and got up. And it was nothing fancy, but it ran. It had no mechanical issues. It was reliable. It was dependable. And for $2,000, I got a car.
All right. So that's one issue taken care of.
That's one issue taken care of. Now, for the remainder of the issues, the whole reason my dad brought a computer over was not so I could surf the internet and look at porn, which I definitely did, but that was not the focus. I had been in prison for 5 years. I mean, give a guy a break. There are some things that you take care of first. But he brought me the computer because he knew how overwhelming it was going to be for me trying to go into places and handing them my resume. So the computer was for me to job hunt, right? And I set my alarm. It was a fully furnished place. It had a little alarm clock. I set that alarm clock for 7 a.m. every day. From 7 a.m. till 8 a.m., had breakfast, worked out, showered, whatever I needed to do for the day. At 8 a.m. in the morning, I clocked in. I sat down in front of that computer at 8 a.m., not 8:01, not 8:02, 8 a.m. every single morning. And from 8 until 12, I diligently submitted application after application after application on Indeed, on Monster, on every other possible place where job postings are listed or where you could apply online. I took a half an hour lunch break from 12 until 12:30 every day. Grabbed a sandwich, watched some porn or watched something on TV where I didn't have 35 other people making it be football that we watched because I don't give a shit about sports. Usually I put the news on for about 20 minutes while I had some lunch, and then TV off at exactly 12:30, back in front of that computer, filling out job applications. I probably submitted 500 applications a day, every single day. And I took 1 day per week where I went out in person to follow up on those job applications. And I didn't get the car until nearly 3 weeks after I got home. I didn't feel comfortable driving, even if I had had a car. I didn't feel safe being in public alone. I was always worried the other shoe was going to drop. Police officers were going to grab me, throw me right back in prison. Not a realistic fear, but it was real enough for me. So my dad would drive me around to go in and do follow-ups and then to drop off applications in places that didn't have an online application process. And I applied. I had done trade school while I was in prison. So I applied to construction companies all over the place. You would think that construction is one of the only industries where they don't care if you've been to prison. In fact, being to prison should make you better in construction because you're used to working hard in shitty environments. But I had a 5-year gap on my resume, and you can't explain away a 5-year gap on your resume. So just like I proudly owned the fact that I was Jewish, you're going to run a background check on me anyway. I might as well tell you, look, I spent 5 years in prison. This is what I went to prison for. And I just got out. I'm looking for a job. I will work my ass off. You can underpay me. I was just looking for a job. Your sentence doesn't begin when they put the handcuffs on you or crack that gavel down. Your sentence to the state begins at that time. But your real sentence begins when you come home, because that's when society starts holding you accountable. That's when society starts judging you and starts punishing you. And almost every single application that I put in had a box that I had to check. Have you ever been convicted of a felony? I'm like, I can't say no, because then even if I got the job, I'd get fired as soon as they found out that I lied, and then I'd be blacklisted because that would spread, right? So I said yes. You know, that box has applications land in the trash without even getting looked at. So that was a major problem for me. And when it comes to getting housing, aside from the first, the last, and the security, you can't get a lease for housing without proof of income. And they usually want to see your last 2 months of pay stubs. I also don't have any pay stubs. Criminal record, no income, no pay stubs, no job. Why would you rent to me when I can't show you that I have even the slightest ability to pay for it? So it was a catch-22, right? Can't get a job because I'm a felon. The people who would be willing to hire the felon wouldn't hire me because I didn't have an address. Nobody would give me an address without having a job, and nobody wanted to rent to a felon, even if you had a job. So it was a rough spot, and it took me 3 weeks. 3 weeks. I was applying for jobs in an ever greater radius from where my dad lived, where I was at, which was Boca Raton, Florida. And I finally got my first yes in Kendall, almost 2 hours away. And it was a plumbing company that agreed to hire me purely because the owner was a Marine Corps veteran, and he believed in giving Marines a chance. Didn't give a shit about my criminal record. The only thing he cared about is, you're a Marine, I'm a Marine. Can you get to the job reliably? So I accepted the job. It was way too far away, but I had gotten so many no's. What choice did I have?
Sure.
What ended up happening is that was 3 weeks out of my 4 of having a place to stay. You got to work for 2 weeks before you get your first paycheck, because pay always runs a week behind. How the hell am I supposed to get a place to stay with 1 week to go, and I don't even start my first day for a week? My first day, I got out on September 8th, 2 days after my birthday. It was Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year. I walked out of the doors on the Jewish New Year. One hell of a way to start a new year, right? It was October 3rd when I started my first day on a job. I put all of that effort in for an entire month before I was able to get a job. So what did I do for housing? Well, I did the only thing that I really had an option to do, because I could have done a homeless shelter. But my dad took me to like 4 of the different shelters, walked in, saw them with me, saw the people standing around, and he's like, Josh, I'm having PTSD from having come visit you in prison just by being here. There's no way in hell you're going to be able to live here. He's like, I won't let you. we ultimately settled on, we got an Airbnb for a month because I didn't have to pay first, last, and security, right? I had a little bit of money left over. I bought the car for $2,000, tax, title, registration. I had about $1,000 left over from what my mom gave me. It was just enough to pay for 30 days at an Airbnb. A nice Caribbean couple. They rented a room to me. Came and went. They were so sweet to me. I told them the truth about what had happened. They didn't care. They were really, really the sweetest couple. We're still friends. We talk on Instagram from time to time. They gave me the platform I needed in order to get my life started, because by the time I got to the end of that first month in the Airbnb, I had now been home for 2 months. I had a month of income. So I had 4 pay stubs, and I was able to find an apartment with 4 pay stubs. I had enough money off of 4 pay stubs to cover first month's rent and a security deposit. I don't remember how I paid for the last month. I think my dad might have helped out just a little bit, and I had to pay him back. But I managed to get a house, an apartment in Hollywood. So it was halfway between my dad and my job. So now all of a sudden I'm an hour away from my dad. I'm really alone. I'm still an hour away from my job, but it was as far away as I felt comfortable going. I didn't want to go further away from my dad. I needed to know that my dad was nearby. And that's where I moved to. Now I can tell you what's real interesting is about my first day on the job, because the everything else, right? This all just sounds very matter of fact, and it's heartbreaking that it was such a struggle. But aside from the fact that I had a leg up, my mom gave me $3,500. My dad and my mom paid for an apartment. They spent like $3,000 for this furnished place for that month. Like, those are huge legs up, but the process is pretty much the same for everybody. You got to find a place to live. You got to find a car. You got to find a job. You're fucked if you don't. It's only a matter of time before you can't couch surf anymore. You got to get it done. That's why recidivism is so high, because not a whole lot of people have the ability to sit down, buckle down, make it happen. And not a whole lot of people coming out of prison have a support network to help facilitate that. What is unusual, though, is you start your first job. Most people, it's McDonald's, it's Walmart, it's Burger King. And that's a normal entry level. They don't expect.
But you didn't go that route. You went with a skill set.
That's right. I went right into construction. I chose a job for a plumbing company because I had gone to a plumbing trade school, and I saw from all of the jobs that I had been applying for that there was a shortage of skilled tradespeople. The salary range seemed to have no cap. The opportunities for advancement seemed to be phenomenal. So if I was gonna work, I might as well be working towards something, right? So I got a job for a plumbing company, and my first day on the job was right on the river in Miami. Not the best neighborhood in the world. And because it was on the river, my first day on the job, it was real foggy. There was a lot of humidity and stuff coming right off of the river early in the morning. I get out of my car. I'm in this rough neighborhood. It's pitch black, not a whole lot of street lights, real foggy, like can't see 15 feet in front of you, foggy. And out of the fog walks this giant bear of a man. Shiny black head, giant beard. He looked like Kimbo Slice. I mean, he was 250 pounds, 6'1". He was wearing a wife beater and black pants and work boots. And he's just big, tough looking black guy. And the first thing that goes through my head is, oh, fuck, I just got out of prison. Here we go again. I'm about to get beat up. And the next thing that happened was he stuck his hand out and he said, "Hey, you must be the new guy. I'm Pat. Ready to get to work?"
Talk about being disarming.
I'll tell you what, man. I didn't know whether he was fucking with me or if he was serious, but it completely caught me off guard because he wasn't in a uniform. I really thought I was gonna get beat up and he was gonna steal my car. I was in a neighborhood where that seemed like it was gonna happen. That's really what went through my head was, oh fuck, here we go again. I just got home. I'm gonna get beat up. Well, he stuck his hand out. He shook my hand. He said, "I'm Pat. You're ready to get to work." We hit it right off. From that moment forward, it was like we had known each other for 20 years. People who I would never, ever have spoken to, let alone connected with 5 years earlier, I felt comfortable. I felt comfortable and safe around Pat. Really crazy that I was around somebody that reminded me of prison and I felt safe. Well, I'm going to finish this train of thought by telling you, fast forward 5 years, because we are now October 22nd. So we are just about 5 years exactly. This was October 3rd of 2018. So just about 5 years. Pat is my best friend. He's my daughter's godfather. He's the best man at my wedding. And we have worked together for 5 years straight. Wherever I have gone, Pat has followed. I couldn't have built the business that I built without him right by my side.
I think it's a perfect place for us to stop for this episode. And we will pick it up with your life over the last 5 years, getting an education, finding a wife, becoming a father, building businesses. So we'll catch that on the other side.
All right.
Losing Privilege is a 12-part podcast series telling the fascinating story of Joshua Elishev and his roller coaster life of success and deception, love and loss, and the determination to survive prison and build a life after nearly losing his own. Visit JoshuaElishev.com. That's Joshua, ELYASHIV.com for details on his book, Privilege Lost, his music, and upcoming projects. And listen and watch all 12 episodes of his podcast, Losing Privilege.